This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for watching this week's edition of NC Spin just before Christmas. Well, I don't think there's ever been a time when people are more willing to drop the cares of the day and celebrate the Christmas holiday. But before we raise that glass of cheer to celebrate, there's some unresolved issues to discuss, and this week's NC Spin wants to vary a bit from our regular format to cover as many of them as we can. We have an excellent panel of seasoned analysts with us this week. They include Phil Kirk, former state senator and chair of the State Board of Education, Chris Fitzsimon, NC Spin's senior political analyst, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, and Bev Perdue, our former governor of North Carolina. We begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages by our underwriters.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Production underwriting support provided in part by the more than 65,000 members of the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
We got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Last week, our panel predicted Governor Roy Cooper would veto the voter ID bill passed by the legislature. Well, he did. Bev, you've been our governor for a number of years and been in the legislature. Did Roy do the right thing?
Yes.
Why?
Because I actually do support, in a very open way, voter ID. This bill was written without input from folks across the state. There was input in the hearings, but I think it's discriminatory. I think that it prevents people from low-income minorities from voting.
Phil, the legislature came back into session this week and in 2 successive days overturned the veto. Why did they feel compelled to have to do it this week instead of waiting until after the first of the year?
Well, I will try to say with a straight face that they had to get the rules out there and so on so people could be educated about them in the Board of Elections. And that's partially true. But they also did it before they lose their supermajority.
Yeah, Chris, the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Coalition, have already filed lawsuits on this thing. This thing's going to court.
Yeah, no surprise. I think the Republican...
How long that case is going to take?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. The Republican legislators, I think, will argue that they have passed a law that is similar to some other states, including South Carolina, that has already been approved by the courts. We'll see if that's true. But I don't think anybody in Raleigh was surprised Governor Cooper vetoed this. I was a little disappointed. Some of the Republicans are saying we have to have voter ID. Well, he doesn't support voter ID, but there are even better ways to do this, and the General Assembly passed it. That's what he wanted.
John, didn't you find it sort of interesting the legislature sort of laid down the gauntlet for the governor, saying if you're going to veto any more bills, we want to know about it before the Christmas holidays because we don't want to deny any of our legislative staff or lobbyists or any of those people or ourselves from being able to enjoy the holidays. Just a bluff?
No, this is a very specific, correct statement.
And Cooper says, well, if you didn't want to have employees not have good holidays, you shouldn't have come back into special session. When you did.
He doesn't get to just say, well, never mind. If you just hadn't had a special session at all. He has telegraphed that he's going to veto this other bill. They wanted to go ahead and veto the bill.
Well,
that's all there is.
Isn't
that's all
what's
this
fair
is
for
about.
the goose fair for the gander?
Absolutely. I admire what he's done, and I think the General Assembly is really telling the truth. They want everybody to be home resting and having fun.
Well, what do you
wrong
think
with
about
that? It's Christmas.
Well,
what do you think about this?
Why not come into session November 15th and do it all? Why are we still here in the middle of December? That's the question for the General Assembly leadership. Cooper didn't make the calendar.
Yes.
He didn't set the session.
What do you think of his threats to veto the bill that separates the Board of Elections and the Ethics Board, basically turning it back to 2016? He says that it provides a lack of transparency, and that he's worried about that.
If there's an ethics investigation, the ethics investigation recommends action, then it's all public. You have an ethics investigation that doesn't recommend anything, it's not public. That's the ethics rules that have already been in place. This is now going to apply to the Elections Board and the Ethics Board, as I understand it. That's the only change. I do not consider it to be material.
Well, for example, we would not have known that Senator Heiss was under investigation this last year, and a lot of people had a lot of questions about his campaign finance report. We would have never known that if this bill had been law.
Are you sure? Did he
it's a campaign finance investigation.
All right, we need to move on.
It concluded, and that would have all been disclosed.
But it should have been disclosed during the process.
If nothing had been found, it should have
You
been
guys can
disclosed.
argue
That's
this
the problem.
offline. We need to move on. The 9th congressional district election saga continues. This week, the state GOP essentially issued a mandate to the State Board of Elections, either certify Mark Harris or come forward to tell us that enough votes were impacted to be able to overturn the November 6th outcome. Phil Kirk, was the state party just playing hardball politics here? Or do they know something we don't know, or what?
Which state party? No, seriously, this has been at the beginning, typical political response. The winners wanted it certified, the losers wanted more investigation. Thank goodness they did put the brakes on the board, and we now know a lot more than we did. So then both parties said that we ought to have investigation should be concluded, and we should probably have a new election. And now it keeps dragging on. They keep bringing in more. So I don't know what's going to happen.
When they were asked to explain all of this, they said, hey, look, we want the state board to take some action here. And we think it was just too long to wait until January 11th for them to hold hearings. Who's right and wrong on this?
I think they should have held hearings immediately. This is the voters' will. You need a congressional candidate down there. You need that candidate certified. And you need a sheriff in Columbus County. So there is something going on in southeastern North Carolina.
And has been for many years.
John, the bill that the legislature passed, part of this Elections Ethics Board bill we've been talking about, says that in the event that the State Board of Elections decides that there are improprieties, they're going to go back and hold a primary election, not the regular election. Bob Orr, who's a panelist on this show, former Supreme Court Justice, wrote I thought, very thoughtful op-ed piece about this. He said that's unconstitutional.
He's sort of alone in this. Most of the other people, oh yes, Jerry Cohen does not agree with him. Lots of other people that I've talked to who are constitutional attorneys disagree with Bob because they point out this is a new election, not the continuation of an old election. If it's a new election, then you can institute this rule for a new election.
Chris, he also had an interesting part in his op-ed piece, I thought, when he addressed the fact that the bill was stripped and there was a substitute. And he says stripping a bill is unconstitutional too. I asked him about that. He says it just hadn't been challenged in court.
Well, it hasn't been challenged in court, although there are actually challenges in other states. It doesn't affect North Carolina, but there are other states around the country where people in lame duck sessions and so forth are challenging that practice. I think it's not a good practice, but I'm not sure it's unconstitutional.
Why do Republicans want a primary election? I mean, why is it they want to go back to the very beginning?
If there's a new election, I think politically they believe Mark Harris may be difficult to win, even if he didn't do anything because his reputation has been so affected. But also there is frankly, a good government argument. Remember that some of these allegations involve the primary. Now, the primary was certified, but we now know some things about the absentee ballots in the primary we didn't know previously.
Phil, this is one of those stories that every day there's something different about. There was a big town hall meeting in Bladen County this past week, packed from what I understand. Lots of people complaining about election tactics that have been going on down there, many of them say for years. And then on Friday morning, we discover that there are irregularities in Columbus County over a sheriff's election there, and that also involved absentee ballots.
Well,
is there enough smoke here to call a fire?
Oh, there is definitely a fire, and just finding out, getting the information timely and taking action. I mean, a few of us remember the Madison County absentee ballot controversy when more people voted than lived there. So it's a shame.
This is the Zeno Ponder affair
of the Southeast.
Yes.
And we also remember the moment in Columbus County when R.C. Soules was losing his Senate race, and suddenly they found some ballots in the courthouse that put him over the top. This is nothing new about these kinds of allegations.
Handicappers are saying that they think that it's almost a foregone conclusion Dan McCready is going to win this election because of the thinking, the impropriety, the accusations.
Well, from my perspective, I hope you're right, but I'm not sure because I do believe the Republicans will offer a different, stronger candidate
and a lot
who
more
will money from all over the country.
McCready had the money last time.
Well, this is an important race.
I saw you kind of flinch when I said that.
No, I think this will be a national election because of all the attention. It's not.
Right.
It's going to be a Republican national money and Democratic national money will come in. So I'm not sure it's a foregone conclusion at all. I think it was very close. It could be close again.
The part of this story that I think that we really ought to be spending the most time paying attention to is that these irregularities have been noted, they have been reported. In instances, they have been turned over to the State Board of Elections. The State Board of Elections noted them and have turned them over to the State Bureau of Investigation and to the feds, and nothing has happened.
Well, I'll be naive here again, and I'm too old to be naive. Both parties put political partisans on the State Board of Elections, whatever it's called now. And so they're sometimes more interested in protecting their party, so they don't go the extra mile, both parties. I wish we could get more people who are not overly partisan from both parties.
I want to stand up for the State Board of Elections, though. They did their jobs. They said there was an irregularity here and turned it over to the State Bureau of Investigation.
In some cases.
And they want it cleared up quickly because it's another soil on North Carolina. Right. You know, this looks bad.
There's no question about that. Is anybody here who doesn't believe we're going to hold a new election for the 9th District?
I think there will be. I have a question about whether there'll be a primary or not.
So why shouldn't we get the State Board of Elections to say, hey, we've got these investigations and they're ongoing and they're going to involve more time, but in the meantime, we've got enough evidence to discern that we need a new election here?
I think that we all feel that impulse, Tom, but we have to be very careful about the precedent we are setting. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. There aren't necessarily enough ballots to change the outcome. That is not legally required. There is a standard that requires. But if we go down that road, what's the limiting principle? We've had illegal votes cast in almost every election in our lifetimes. Maybe not enough to change the outcome, but does that taint it enough to have a new election? There is a problem of what's the limiting principle.
We're three or 4 days away from Christmas, and there's several of these stories that are just bubbling around. One of them involves the UNC Board of Governors. The Board of Governors last week rejected Chapel Hill's proposal to move Silent Sam to a new $5.3 million building on the edge of campus and gave UNC until March 15th to come up with another plan. John, most people agree this is a no-win conundrum for everybody, and since nobody seems to like the trustees' decision at UNC, shouldn't the Board of Governors have just made the decision themselves?
What decision is that?
I don't know.
That's the point.
They didn't know either.
Well, the decision is to put Silent Sam back where he was or to move him to some other location.
I do not believe they have either the majority on the board or a sense that there's a majority behind the board to do either, to either put it back where it was or to put it in a fortress, as the proposal for the Board of Trustees was, or to put it in a museum or to leave it in storage. There is no majority position for any of these options.
Chris, is there a win-win here? Is there something that's acceptable to everybody? Or are we just going to keep?
Well, I think if it was, it would have already bubbled to the surface and we would know it. I mean, I'm on the side of I don't believe that statue or whatever you want to call it belongs on a campus where African-American students have to walk by it every day.
Or women.
Or women too. But that being, then I don't know what the solution is. You know, I thought the way the Board of Trustees, the proposal, I didn't like that either. But I liked it better certainly than putting it back. The Board of Governors has to decide what to do. I thought President Spellings, outgoing President Spellings, sort of explained the conundrum pretty well in a lot of interviews she's given.
I think she has. Bev, you're closely connected with education. A lot of the teaching assistants and instructors over at UNC Chapel Hill threatened to boycott. They said they weren't going to turn their students' grades in if the authorities, whoever they may happen to be, didn't accede to their desires over Silent Sam, whatever they may happen to be. They relented at the last minute. But what do you think about this idea of teachers and withholding grades in protest?
Well, I've never been a big supporter of strikes in general. So whether it's teachers or auto workers, anybody, I just think it defeats the whole purpose. The Silent Sam thing is awful. It looks to me like somebody would have the maturity and the good sense to just make a decision to move it. It's offensive. It was offensive to me the first time I walked on that campus and was told what it really stood for about women. I won't repeat that on your show, but it's offensive. It needs to go. It needs to go.
So far as it goes, the teachers but should there be some, if they decided to follow through with this, should there be some punitive actions for them withholding grades?
I agree with the governor about strikes and holding grades, and while I think teachers and everyone has a right to express their opinion, I think that's going way too far. It actually penalizes the students, and I think they ought to stick to their teaching.
The other story we heard breaking on this past week was that donors are now contacting UNC Chapel Hill and threatening to withhold their gifts.
Oh, yes.
If something's not done about this.
And that's not new. That's been happening for months. And when we say donors have been threatened, it's important not to jump to conclusions about who is doing what. There are donors who say, if you put this thing back on campus, I'll never give you another cent. And also donors, equally supportive, if you don't put it back on the campus, I will never give you a cent. That's part of the challenge they've got.
I want to express my support for Chancellor Folt. She has inherited a number of things, and she's had to deal with a lot of challenges. And
how does this rank with athletics scandals?
Well, that's part of it, and that happened before she came, I think. That's what I said, that I actually feel sorry for her.
But doesn't this open up another question, Chris? Okay, Silent Sam, obviously we get what's going on with this. But I mean, where do you stop here? Is this going to involve other monuments? Are we going to have to be moving them? Are we going to have to change names of buildings on campuses?
We might. That's, history evolves. We might do that. We've
done
that all the way through
rewriting history to a certain extent?
No, it's recognizing things that we didn't know in history. It's worth pointing out that the state of Texas, not a liberal state by any means, you know what they did right after the Charlottesville riot? They took down an offensive Confederate statue on the University of Texas campus.
They did.
The University of Texas, in a very conservative state, immediately and said, we're not going to deal with this. This is offensive to our students. We could have done that then. Governor Cooper gave the university the opportunity, and let's don't forget the law the General Assembly passed to try to make it harder to take these monuments down.
Well, and that's part of the stumbling block that Chapel Hill is dealing with here. Okay. So, John, UNC's got to present another plan by March 15th. Who knows what that could come up to be. Is it then going to be up to the Board of Governors to approve that? And then could conceivably it go to the legislature?
If they are asking the legislature to modify the law, then it would still require legislative action. If not, I still think the most likely scenario is that they will do a cheaper version of what the Board of Trustees had proposed. I think that's the most likely outcome at the moment, but I wouldn't put a high percentage on it because nobody really knows exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem here is this is not just about whether the statue should be on campus. It's if you take it after it has been attacked and destroyed by vandals, what precedent are you setting? That's part of what the donors are screaming about. We don't really care about the statue as much as we do. Are you going to let some people, anarchists from Durham with masks on and throwing tear gas canisters, are these the people who are going to decide what happens at UNC? That's part of the challenge here.
Interesting. Well, it's not getting as much press, but it is a story, and it has some note to us in North Carolina. It's had some developments in this past week. A judge revoked the permit for the construction of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Even the project has more problems in North Carolina, however, because lawmakers had opened an investigation over a proposed $58 million fund developers were willing to pay to mitigate environmental problems. The legislature is accusing Governor Cooper of creating a slush fund for his pet projects and opened an investigation. Chris, so far as it goes, Governor Cooper last week requested public records from their hearings. They had requested a lot of information from him. He requested legislation from their hearings and accused them of political showmanship here. What's your reaction to this?
Clearly this is all political showmanship. I think there's two separate issues here. One is, was this, they call it a slush fund, he calls it a mitigation fund. Is it a good idea or not? We should debate that all day long, I think, and I wouldn't be a big supporter of it. But I don't think it's a crime, and it's not the Watergate conspiracy here. They're going to probably find some embarrassing emails when they're turned over, but I don't think the governor was looking to do anything. He thought this was an effective way to mitigate and hand out these grants as the other agencies, other parts of state government do. I was a little bit surprised the General Assembly's hiring a private investigative firm.
Yeah.
Are we going to go down the road where different branches of government are going to hire private investigation firms when we have parts of state government that's their responsibility. We have law enforcement, we have other people who can do that kind of thing. I think that's as troubling a precedent about this as anything.
John, the governor at the end of the week dumped a large number of documents over to the legislature. I understand there are thousands of pages that were involved in this, which is another interesting story that perhaps we'll talk about a little bit after the first of the year. But I think the real question here, can North Carolina prevent this pipeline, and is it in jeopardy?
No. What's happening in North Carolina is not affecting the pipeline, which is currently suspended because of disputes about environmental permitting in Virginia, not in North Carolina. There was already a mitigation fund funded according to a standard formula. This is something else. And obviously the governor was trying to placate his left wing by saying, we're going to say yes to this thing that I know you hate. We're going to spend some money on renewables. It kind of blew up in his face, but the way it was handled afterwards was worse, arguably, than the initial decision.
Phil, we had some notion that perhaps after the new election, there might be some warming of spirit between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and there was some cooperation involved in writing the voter ID bills between Democrats and Republicans. Doesn't this just demonstrate that that ain't going to happen next year?
Oh, I'm sure after people celebrate Christmas and all things are going to be hunky-dory in January. I said something about being naive a little bit ago.
Is there some Christmas cheer in that cup of yours there?
I am hoping that will be the case, but I have my doubts. I think their animosity is too deep, and I hope I'm wrong.
One final topic before we get to the tell us something we don't know. The ACA deadline, the Obamacare deadline, was last week, Saturday, and we don't know the final numbers, but we know enrollments were down about 14% over the past year. It didn't help that the federal judge in Texas ruled that Obamacare was unconstitutional. But Bev, why are fewer people enrolling in Obamacare now?
The PR recruitment campaign is gone. Obama invested lots of money and resources electronically into getting people to sign up. And that has totally disappeared. And so folks are busy with their own lives. They don't think about health care or a deadline.
Does it go deeper than that, John?
It is primarily because the people who were signing up because they felt like they had to, because they didn't want to pay the fine. No, it never made any economic sense for them to sign up. They were just being compelled. But that's not very many. I mean, a lot of this may just be a phantom number because people are going to renew in their current plans and we just don't have them in the system yet.
Late in the week there was, I think it was, somebody guessed 502,000 people in North Carolina, which is down significantly from 600,000, but that's still a lot of people in North Carolina that managed to sign up.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is to your point.
Yeah, they're heavily subsidized. Why wouldn't they sign up?
Okay. Can't go into Christmas without asking the panel to tell us something we don't know. I'm looking forward to this as much as you are. Bev, I'm going to start with you.
Well, you know, I didn't know, and I bet a lot of people in North Carolina don't know. I've been involved in a lot of elections, and I never knew that I needed to have a guru for absentee ballots to pay the money. That is interesting to me.
Memo to self. For your next election.
Hire a guru.
Now, you could be the guru based on your experience.
John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Mick Mulvaney has a third job in the Trump administration, acting chief of staff. People may not know that while he was originally a state legislator in Congress from South Carolina, he's actually a North Carolinian, grew up in Charlotte. He moved over the line to South Carolina years ago because he thought North Carolina's taxes were too high. So he ended up being a South Carolina politician rather than a North Carolina politician. But this is the second North Carolinian to hold the chief of staff job, if you think about it, for a modern president. If you go back to Erskine Bowles.
I did not know that. I was glad to hear that. Yeah. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
As we were having this discussion here, the country is trying to decide if we're going to have a federal government shutdown. The whole issue is immigration. I was just reading the other day, you may know this, but the number of undocumented people in the United States has been going steadily down the last 12 or 15 years. It's like a 10 or 15 year low. It continues to go down. There is no massive people on the border. This is all a manufactured crisis that has a lot of people in North Carolina who work for the federal government or who depend on federal programs for their subsistence to be very alarmed.
Merry Christmas.
Absolutely.
Phil Kirk, tell us something we don't know.
I had an educational one, but after some of these comments, I've changed mine about chiefs of staff. I've had the opportunity to be chief of staff for 2 governors and a U.S. senator, and Trump has not called me to be chief of staff, and if he did, I would have to think about 2 seconds and say no.
I was getting ready to say, do you really want that kind of punt? I'd soon have a root canal, wouldn't you?
Well, I've had root canals.
Well, I've got one real quick before we close. A good friend of all of ours, Dave Bolick, a longtime newsman who has been in the Triangle market, is very, very ill, and all of us send best wishes to not only Dave but his family. We have fond memories of Dave walking around the halls of the legislature and rumbling around all kinds of state agencies. Well, anyway, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter, give your feedback, and read my weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NCSpin on Facebook, and join us next week. We've got a really special end-of-year interview with Governor Roy Cooper. Until then, Merry Christmas, stay informed, and watch out for the spin.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Production underwriting support provided in part by the more than 65,000 members of the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.